Comrades, today I deal directly with events following the February Revolution of 1917 in Russia. And it is a legitimate question to ask. Why, of all the questions, of all the issues that are facing the working class in the United States, and indeed the whole world, that are so pressing and so urgent, why are we discussing this? Events that took place decades and decades ago, and which seem to have only a very remote interest for us. Why give so much time and why stress it? Why? Lenin was often asked the same question when he was elaborating on fundamental political issues. And he often gave this example. He said, it's an example from one of Tolstoy's books. He said some people were observing a man who was making irrational motions that were not understood, and he seemed to be in a very highly emotional state of mind, especially his motion by the hand and the leg seemed to have no sense to it. And Tolstoy said, well, look a little closer, see, and you will see. Come forward and watch more carefully what's going on with this man. And so if you come closer and closer, you see the man is sitting on a chair with something like a wheel moving and with a long knife. He's sharpening a knife. Now that is a very instructive lesson. What seemed to be irrational and so on was in reality preparation for the struggle. Sharpening a knife, moving your hand and feet to see that the knife is sharpened very properly. And that's what our discussions are about. How to sharpen our tools for the impending struggle. They are very important, and we should not look upon them as academic exercises, but as life and death questions on how we will learn to use the weapons that are available to us and use them in the kind of way which will transform capitalist society into a socialist order. To do this, we have to understand some of the lessons of the Russian Revolution and how Lenin and Trotsky and the party as a whole viewed the developments. What are some of the lessons that we need to learn, first of all? Well, and from whom shall we learn it? Which are the ones that are most essential, see? Take Lenin's writings at that time, right after the overthrow of the Tsarist monarchy, see? Where was he? He was still in exile. But as the situation changed so radically, with the Tsarist government being overthrown, and virtually everybody having the right to say and think what they want, every type of speech making and every type of printing, it was all in there. The capital in particular, St. Petersburg at that time, was full of excitement because everybody was involved in one form or another of political activity. And all of them were looking forward as to what is the next step, what will be done. While Lenin was in exile, see, he might have easily come right back along with the others, but he held back. But all the other comrades, as many as were possible, coming from as far away as Siberia and elsewhere, they were gathering in the capital, in the center. Trotsky again had to use his weapon that was most effective in the building of the party, writing about it, writing on what should be done in a new and utterly unanticipated situation, at least from the point of view of what happened yesterday, in, let us say, in St. Petersburg. See, what was to be done now? What should be done? The party was agitating most of all for the overthrow of the old government, of the Tsarist regime. But now it was overthrown. And as I said in an earlier time, I believe there's a great deal of euphoria and jubilation that could be understood. All exiles coming back, political prisoners being let out. Those are no small things. Those are really very important developments. Men who've been in prison for years suddenly coming out, not only Bolsheviks, but Menshevik leaders like Chaitsy and others, you see. And no sooner have they come out than they come back agitating that the programs that they had before they got into jail in Siberia, see. Lenin was most keenly attuned to what the situation was, but also very frustrated that once again he was in exile and the center was elsewhere. The center was in Petersburg, and the question as to him coming to the center might only be hazardous, but be completely self-defeating. It's to be remembered that of all those leaders who were watched by the police and who the capitalist press continually harangued about, it was Lenin that was attacked most fiercely and most often. It was Lenin and the Leninists who were always in the forefront of attacks by the bourgeois, and the counter-revolutionary press and the social democrats, and all had joined in. And in that way, the Bolsheviks also developed fierce self-defense, polemics, and self-defense in relation to the police and to the military. Now, see, being faced with a new situation calls for an alteration of tactics, what we often have faced and will face in the future, and how to assess it quickly with the least amount of factional infighting, although having the freest amount of discussion possible. This is the ABC for a proletarian revolutionary party. Not to thwart, not to end the discussion, but to elevate it, organize it, do it in a disciplined manner, arrive at a decision, and move forward. This is the essence of Leninist politics in the class struggle. Now, as I said, all of the leaders were coming back to old Russia, finding a new situation. Trotsky came back. Lenin was to come back out somewhat later, but in the meantime, he was writing from his hideout and being more aware that the police and the military would be after him as soon as he made himself available, and that maintaining himself in exile and in secrecy was a most important duty to the proletariat. Solzhenitsyn, the counter-revolutionary czarist spokesman, who I believe is already back in Russia with the reactionary government, he wrote about Lenin in exile, stating that he had lost any connection with Russia and didn't know what was going on and didn't know what was happening with the revolution, and that it wasn't till it actually had broken out that he decided, well, maybe he ought to write something which Solzhenitsyn said was irrelevant to the situation in the first place. All a great deal of lies and slander. Well, what actually Lenin was doing was to address himself to the most important questions. See? But the most important question was the internal question. See? The most important internal question was to turn the party around on the program in view of the fact that what we were faced with was not a democratic dictatorship of the peasantry, or rather the workers and the peasantry, but with a bourgeois government outright, as Trotsky may have predicted it accurately, and Lenin more in algebraic and more general terms. See, but however it was, the masses were jubilant. And the question was how to prepare for the next phase, because the bourgeoisie was not defeated. The counter-revolutionary czarist military was not defeated. The bourgeoisie itself was still in place. They still were the owners of the factories. It's true that some ran away. Some left early. Some of the banks closed, took the money with them, left. Those are some of the incidental things. But what was it that Lenin was most concerned with? He was most concerned that the party had a new revolutionary program that was concerned with changing old slogans, and at the same time to bring about new revolutionary tactics and strategy in the struggle against the new government of Russia, which he recognized as the government of the bourgeoisie, and warned in his writings that the masses do not recognize this as yet, that the masses are very much full of hope and give a lot of credence to the new government, and that he urged the party to carefully take that into consideration. That while we must prepare for a struggle against the new government, a government of the bourgeoisie, we must recognize that the masses are in support support of the new government. And that our tactics must be such as to take all this into account while at the same time exposing most mercilessly the new character of the government, but by no means urging its violent overthrow, even though the Bolsheviks may have enough soldiers in the Petersburg area to do that very thing. It is necessary to educate the masses, to explain to the masses what is happening, and more importantly, to explain it all to the party and to the leaders so that we will be fully armed in the coming struggle. But agitation and propaganda of a revolutionary working class character is most important. And that is what Lenin was devoting himself in his letters from afar, writing to the party on how to approach the new situation. Although he is so far away from the center of the struggle, although he is in exile and is isolated and has to watch his step and be continually frustrated by the lack of communication, he nevertheless feels that his own role as educator, as leader, as theoretician of the revolutionary proletariat, that his own survival is very much a key question for the revolution. Some of this is in writing by others and some not. But that is what the real situation with Lenin is. We're trying to write from exile to a center where all the party leaders have come together from different parts of the country and who are new to each other in some respects, haven't seen each other and just, exchanging views and so on. Lenin in his writing letters expects communications, expects answers. And he doesn't get answers. He gets no answers to his letters. And he gets more and more frustrated that maybe he shouldn't be there, maybe he should go directly, maybe he should stay. What should he do? There is communications from the center are very meager. He has to wait for newspapers in exile to see what's happening in the capital. And that is extremely frustrating to a leader who is by far the chief architect of the revolution, of the party, and of initiating and developing the cadres of the party. Finally, he gets so frustrated and not getting proper communications, he writes a letter to the Central Committee that he recognizes that he's out of touch and that the comrades are not responsive to his letters, and therefore, under the circumstances, he's taking a hint that maybe they don't want him as the leader of the Central Committee and of the party, and therefore he is offering his resignation. I don't know if he actually sent this letter out, but he did dictate it. He did write it. And if the comrades ever got it, they would not take it seriously as a threat to resign, but as a means of getting back to communicating with him and to see to it that the remedial steps be taken to have communication with the leader. But this is one of the problems. Trotsky solved the problem by coming as soon as possible and getting right into the midst of the struggle. This might have made others happy, and it certainly was no reason for the party not to be happy about it. He had joined the party really in many ways, but still Trotsky was Trotsky. As one who had been an opponent for so long, and for him to be at the helm of leadership in St. Petersburg while Lenin was not there seemed to be extraordinarily an extraordinarily delicate question on how to relate to the struggle. Well, as it turned out, the letter had no significance politically because the comrades understood Lenin. And they weren't about to change leaders under any circumstances. He was the very heart and soul of party leadership. And what was necessary, most of all, was how to strengthen the party with respect to the new capitalist government. It was necessary to call for a new Congress of the party or conference in April, and to bring out new theses on how to attack the capitalist government and how to prepare the party for insurrection. Now, none of this seemed at the time as a realistic proposition, considering that the masses were so fully imbued with a revolution, but a policy of waiting and seeing. But after a while, it became clear that the new government was very much like the old government, that above everything else, it wanted to continue the war, which the soldiers were ready to give up and go back to the farms. So far as the factories, the workers wanted to take them over, but the government opposed the occupation and ready to use force. The people wanted low prices on food and to make the food available. And the new government had the same policy of the old one, to encourage higher prices without giving the masses any concessions. In short, in a very short period of time, the masses were getting disillusioned with the government. First, they are very euphoric about a change. But change had to come quickly, and it didn't come. But what did come was a new thesis by Lenin, a new approach for the party on how to handle the situation and to make sure that the party could meet the oncoming crisis. See? There are many aspects of which I can go into, but this is not a talk on the history of the Russian Revolution, which could take weeks, properly so, and even longer, because there is a great deal that a working class revolutionary party can learn. And we want to solicit, to dig out, rather, only those lessons which are most important for our party in our contemporary struggle, so that we may guide ourselves accordingly. The principal problem, as Lenin conceived it, was the relationship of the party to the masses, and the relationship of the masses to the capitalist government. See? Talk of revolution, now that a revolution had occurred, was on everybody's lips. Everybody was talking revolution. Everybody was for revolution. Even some from the royalty. But what kind of revolution? Revolution against whom? And revolution for whom? There had to be clarity. This was what had to be done. Most of all, people were talking that the Bolshevik party was the revolution. The Mensheviks thought that they were the revolution. The peasant party, so-called, of the Kerensky, they thought that they were the leaders of the revolution. Everybody thought of themselves as the leaders of the revolution. Once the revolution, which overthrew the Tsar's government, had taken place, but who was in favor of a new revolution to overthrow the present government? That was a distinctly other matter. That was discussed only by the Bolsheviks and some of the left wing in the Menshevik party, and by the group that Trotsky had headed, a small group, and they spoke about the new revolution, but the only one that was clear on that was Trotsky himself, for the revolution that is against the new government, how to overthrow the new government. Now, that being on the agenda, historically, the overthrow of the new government. So that was what the Bolsheviks were concerned with. The Mensheviks did not see that at all as the case. They saw themselves as a minority and saw the Bolsheviks as a minority. They said, both of us are a minority. The vast majority are the peasants. And these new officials in the government represent the peasants, and Kerensky above all. The new prime minister within a short period, he's supposed to represent the peasants. Therefore, said the Mensheviks, what we need is a coalition government with the peasant party, so-called, the social revolutionaries, and also to support the new government, and that we be the left wing in support of the new government. We criticized them, and so on. To get really an accurate picture as to what that meant was like this. Like in France, or in Germany, and in England, and later perhaps in the United States, where a Workers' Party has tremendous power, but instead of fighting to overthrow the capitalist government and institute a proletarian dictatorship, what they want to do is to unite with the Mensheviks want to unite with the liberals, and the liberals hold out their hands to the reactionaries, and they all support the capitalist government in one way or another on the ground that we have no majority. We workers don't have the majority, and so on and so forth. And therefore, we have to have a coalition government to get some sort of a concession. But to overthrow that government, oh no, that is altogether out of the question. Because the Mensheviks are in favor of a compromise, see. A compromise with the property classes. And this is what Lenin's writings and his letters are all about, on how to prepare the party for the seizure of power, how to undo this government of the bourgeoisie, and hopefully, viewing the mass movement, they are becoming every day more susceptible to the propaganda of the Bolsheviks against the new government. But first of all, the propaganda of the party, it has to turn its guns against the new government. It's sharp attacks. And this is what is happening. See? Now, the biggest and most important lesson in connection with this new situation is the relation of the party to the masses, and how is it preparing itself for the revolution. Now, at that time there were quite a number of revolutionaries and Marxists outside of the Bolshevik party, like Rosa Luxemburg and others, who also saw the situation as a revolutionary one, who also saw the nature of the new government as a capitalist government, but also were not in favor of the seizure of power by an insurrection, at least under those circumstances. It goes to show you that even when you are a revolutionary and when you are a Marxist all your life, the time nevertheless comes when you have to make a decision on how to apply a Marxism, and it could be entirely in the wrong direction, as it is with Rosa Luxemburg, who felt that the Bolsheviks were preparing not for a normal proletarian revolution, but were orienting towards a coup d'etat, something which beheads the mass movement and does not in reality respond to the historic needs of the masses. But Lenin was very, very keen. He could tell he could recite the views of Rosa Luxemburg in his sleep before she even writes them. That's my interpretation of it. And he understood it. And he saw as his main objective to go over the political situation with a minimum of revolutionary phrases where everybody was talking revolution, and to analyze what the situation is between the party and the masses. Rosa Luxemburg's view, and some others, was that the Bolsheviks were trying to substitute themselves for the masses, to do the things that only the masses can do, and that this was really obstructing the development of proletarian class consciousness and depriving them of initiative. Again and again throughout all of the history of the working class movement, you will hear charges that this or that revolutionary group is substituting itself for the masses and doing things that are for the masses to be done, and therefore this group is usurping the power of the masses. See? But Lenin was prepared for these arguments and knew that they had validity in some respects, but not in others. And so he developed a series of writings about Marxism and Blanquism. And what in the world, may someone ask, what is Blanquism? Blanqui was a revolutionary in a place you might guess France, where all the great revolutions have taken place. But against all the great revolutions in France which involved the masses, Blanque's idea was, look, the masses will support you if you do it yourself. If you wait for the masses, you are a laggard. You will never achieve anything. The masses want leadership, and leadership is what we got to do. We have to prepare for an insurrection. We have to be meticulous in our planning. We must take in not everybody into our confidence, but only those who have proven themselves to be in the struggle against the bourgeoisie. We must act in a conspiratorial way, not openly and so on. Hence, it was very clear from the early days that Lenin was attempting to utilize the lessons of Blanque's experiences as regards the Russian Revolution. Blanque had gone through several attempts at a coup d'etat, each one of them, of course, having failed. Most of the time he was imprisoned, escaped or got freed, tried to rebuild again another conspiratorial group in an attempt to overthrow the French capitalist government. What was it that Marxists saw in Blanque that was progressive? What was progressive in Blanque was that he was a revolutionary socialist, that he was a determined revolutionary, that he was disciplined and was serious, that he was for the revolution. But the revolution had to come from dedicated revolutionaries who had no other motive than to prepare for the revolution, not in theory for some time in the future, but to begin as soon as the group is ready, regardless as to whether the masses are ready or not. The masses, he said, are fine, but they got to be led. They're not going to do it. And he would go over the French Revolution and show that, however the masses were involved, it was really a small group that started it. That there are always the small groups that start it. That the masses come in later. That you can't wait for the masses. You can't expect that of them. They work all day. They got obligations to family and other and other problems, but the business of overthrowing a government has to be by a select group. And the significant thing about it is that he was able to get a small group. And if it collapsed and it was imprisoned, there was another time again. Only you can try that in France, which had a long history of revolutionary struggle. Lenin saw in Blanque a determined revolutionary, something that Bolsheviks had to take over. His determination, his readiness, that we need a small group, but not exactly like his. We need a small group that can lead a larger group and a never larger group. That the party was the small lever that would rotate and get a larger lever. And pretty soon they'd be moving the biggest wheels of all with this little lever. The party was the transmission belt for it. So that the little group, the smaller group, was the party. But unlike Blanque, it had to have mass influence. It had to be everywhere with the masses. had to combine the relationship of a small group to the larger group and organize in the larger group with mass organizations. So what Lenin did in this particular period, right after the February Revolution, and to my knowledge, he's the only one that did it. All his writings about it are Blanquism and Marxism, see? Instead of talking only about how to take over quickly and what to do, he first of all laid a theoretical foundation for the party. So when he came out of exile into the party center, the party already had material to be educated on what the current situation is. So he explained that the party was the smaller group, that it had to take into account the mass movement and how to win it. We first have to win the mass movement to us, and not assume that we are the mass movement. In other words, all that the Bolsheviks were being accused of, Lenin was taking measures to see that that accusation was altogether false. That while the party had conspiratorial aims, as it should, it was nevertheless highly influential in the mass movement and very much akin to its needs, its position. See? So he wrote them letters and articles on Marxism and Blanquism. Marxism is distinguished from Blanquism. He went on again and again to say, not by having greater revolutionary determination, not by greater self-sacrifice and organization. We're distinguished by them because we cannot ignore the masses, but on the contrary, become more and more inseparable from them and win them to our side. And this is the distinguishing characteristic between Marxism and Blanquism. Blanquism had not attained a successful proletarian revolution anywhere. And if we are going to attain a proletarian revolution in Russia, we have to realize the policies of Blanquism and proceed in a revolutionary Marxist and proletarian way. See, this was very important from the point of view of educating the party and giving the party weapons against those who were saying, you are substituting for yourself for the masses. You think you're everything just because you have a stronger party and that you have friendliness and cooperation from certain elements of the army. Oh, you think you're everything, but you are not Russia. Russia is the great peasant country with millions of millions, and you Bolsheviks are a small minority. And I would answer, we may be a small minority, but we are a larger one than the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie is even smaller, is discredited, is our oppressor. This is the problem. We're not fighting the majority. We're on the side of the majority. We're fighting the bourgeoisie. The issue is not minority or majority. The issue is which class. The class of the bourgeoisie is a minority. The class of the proletariat is numerous and large as against the bourgeoisie. There is, of course, the peasantry, and that we have to pay close attention. Suppose I take a 5-minute break. How's that?